Okay, so to kick us off, we are going to have our presenting pal talk to us today about attracting resources through a strong, dynamic impact message. Our presenting pal is Chau Nguyen. Chau has been a dear friend of mine since our teens. In fact, and you're probably going to kill me, Chau, I'm going to share a photo collage that she sent to me this morning. Can y'all see this? See if I can make that. I don't know, it might be a little difficult to see, but there is her and I kind of in the middle right there. I'm in the pink, she's kind of in the white. I'm guessing we might have been, I don't know, 16, 15 or so doing that crazy photo. But Chau is an Emmy Award-winning journalist. She has worked in Guam, Houston, and Atlanta. And then now she is working on behalf of the Women's Foundation in Houston, Texas. She is an amazing communicator, a community builder, a consensus builder, and just overall a very dedicated, passionate social leader in Houston, Texas, and around the country. So Chau, you have about 10 minutes to talk to us, and we certainly look forward to hearing you. And for those of us that are on the call, please mute yourselves so that Chau can stay very focused on what she's talking about, because I'm cracking the whip with Charlie to keep her about 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay.
You're up, ma'am.
All right. Thank you so much, Michelle. And thank you for the opportunity to speak and all the generous accolades. I will say that, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My careers have actually led me from journalism now to social services. I am a licensed social worker. This is my second career and my calling, if you will. I work at the Houston Area Women's Center. I know there's probably a like organization in Atlanta and Georgia. We support survivors of domestic and sexual violence and sex trafficking. Been around for about 43 years, and I am grateful to serve on the leadership team as the chief public strategist. What I do is I'm in charge of all internal and external communications. I support the development team. At one point, I was the development officer as well when we merged the two departments. So as you know, many of you working in nonprofits, you wear a lot of hats. I started my social work career really as a therapist. I left television news about 10 years ago and went back and got my master's in social work because people go, God, how do you go from, a TV reporter and anchor to this? And it's really easy. When you work in the field as a reporter and you cover stories of injustice and you meet people in tragic circumstances socioeconomically, and you see the inequities in our community, how do you not become sort of a social worker in action, right, in training? So that's where my heart of compassion and feeling like, we can do more as a community was born over the years. And so over the years, I went from being a therapist and working in a women's organization that worked in recovery. And then about 5 years ago, I joined the Houston Area Women's Center and really have gotten involved in this movement, so to speak, to end violence. And we're doing a lot of great things during COVID. But I want to make sure that what I share for you might be useful in sort of your areas of advocacy and professional development. And I'll share it from sort of this coronavirus lens, because that's what we're all kind of focused on right now, right? So when the coronavirus, at least in Houston, the pandemic sort of, the sky fell, as I like to say, it was really about mid-March. We actually had a 3,000 person 5K on the weekend of March 7th. So during that week, our main sponsor was AIG, which is a big insurance company. And of course, in insurance, they say, well, Chau, every single day they reached out to us. What are your plans? And we actually followed what the city and the county health department would do, right? So we would follow them, and we said, don't worry, the mayor is our honorary chair. The police chief is going to be there as well. And so that morning we had the festival and the 5K and the family festival, and everything was fine. And then by, of course, the following week, things started shutting down. And of course, we're for a social services agency, we're nervous as well. We're looking at fundraising. We're looking at a staff of 125. And so what we decided is, and we started seeing our calls spike in the hotlines, and we decided we are going to push out our mission and message and tell the story of what we're hearing on the hotlines. And since March, about mid-March, when our non-residential facility, which includes supportive counseling and face-to-face walk-ins and all those activities, were suspended and then taken virtually. In our department, what we said is, we're going to continue talking about and telling our stories. So one of the things that I say is, during this pandemic, tell your story of your mission. Share it through the eyes of the hotline or the advocates. Share it to the eyes of your employees, of the clients you serve. We've done Zoom interviews with our hotline advocates. It's Child Abuse Prevention Month. We did it with our Children's Court Services Director, and I do it, right? We do these sort of one-on-ones, and we share it on our social media. And our social media is look, it's earned media, right? This is an organic. None of us have big budgets to, buy media. So we put things on our social media, and then we share it with our media friends. Since March 13th, we've been on media at least 30 times, and that's just in local news, in online publications. And as we generate those stories, they're being shared on the World Wide Web. We got a call this week from the BBC Radio who found a story. The reporter found a story on the internet. So the first takeaway I say is just keep telling your story. If you can't get it on local TV, then get it on your social media. Get it on your e-blast. We just launched a citywide, countywide campaign and really brought it together we brought together the website in a matter of 48 hours. We brought together we launched the campaign with all our city partners and domestic violence partners within a week. It can be done. It's a labor of love. I can tell you that, we spent many, many hours making sure we bring this together, but our story is very important. And so when my CEO goes out and talks in a big press conference, the first thing I have, the first talking point I share, and it's really in my storytelling background, is I share the stories from the hotlines. Whatever stories, whatever your mission is, there is a compelling story that people will remember. They're not going to remember things in the news conference about, domestic violence is bad, right? They're going to remember that the nurse who came home after a 12-hour day is faced with an increasingly violent and abusive and controlling partner. So those are the stories that I continue to share and we continue to gather because it's important for us. The other takeaway I would say is, no matter how you share your mission, just share it. Talk to your donors, talk to we've sent out messages to our volunteers. It's Volunteer Appreciation Week to say, we didn't forget about you. We look forward to the day that we're going to have that face-to-face. But if you want to stay engaged through our virtual channels. So we do a lot of that. And then finally, don't forget your relationships that you've had within the mission. Don't forget the core, our board of directors, our advisory council. For us, advocacy is another piece. It's not all about raising money, because that advocacy piece draws people to your mission and reminds them. People have called us from all over saying, what can I do to help? Our greatest need is our financial contribution, but how are we spending that money, right? We're spending that money to safely harbor clients in hotels. Do we have that bucket of money sitting around? No. And really, we don't promote that. That's not something we do typically, is harbor clients. We harbor them in our shelter, but our shelter's full. It's always full, but it's particularly, the need is particularly great. And so when people say, and don't be ashamed to say, look, we need fundraising for this particular effort right now. So we've done that. What we've seen in the last month or so is we've had an incredible unintended consequence of people. The outpouring of financial contributions for us has been actually, surprisingly, we've done pretty well, because we've continued to push out our message. We've continued to be in the news and at the forefront as the thought leaders in this drive and this mission. Now, I will tell you, things aren't perfect, right? And I'll share with you some mistakes we've made in the past. And Michelle and I were talking about this, we try things, right, for fundraising and campaigns. And sometimes you have success and sometimes you don't. So at the end of the year, which, you know, for us, we work on a calendar year, and the end of the year, people give, as they do for many organizations. And so this year we decided back at the end of 2019, why don't we try the text to give and see if it would work? So we bought the text to give from Mobile Cause or one of those organizations for a few $1,000s. And we said, let's just try it. Let's try to ask people. And you can set the text to give, and, you know, you get all the text, the phone numbers from your database. Let's ask them to support the organization by pushing here. And so we did that. On Christmas Eve, we did a blast at noon, and then at 6, and then at New Year's Eve at, you know, 6 and 9. We typically get an outpouring of support on our e-blasts and our social media. That's where our financial contributions come in. We don't get it on text, and we learned that for our $3,000 investment, we raised $10. Seriously, $10. And we, you know, we sort of, but we're like, okay, that was a bad idea. People do not want to get text messages on Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve. So there's always lessons to learn. We don't do it perfectly, you know, but we charge ahead because we're very mission focused. We believe in supporting, you know, the clients we serve. And, you know, without a good message, without making sure that you push out that external communication, you know, we may not have the effect that we've had. So we've been very fortunate. You know, we look towards, and as right now, like many of your organizations, we have big special events, right? We had the race and we eked by that. But we have a big luncheon coming up with Lorena Bobbitt. You might remember her. And so she and I have been in touch, and we're looking at contingency plans. That's my child right there, by the way. Contingency plans. I'm homeschooling just like everybody else. On what we would do. Would that look like a virtual luncheon? Can we gather 500 to 600 people, you know, by October? Maybe, maybe not. So anyways, I mean, so we'll just continue moving forward with that. We have some friends and partners at a think tank at Rice University, which is a local university here. They're hosting a virtual luncheon. They typically get 1,000 people. And so, you know, in touch, being a good friend of my, of the development director there, I said, Evan, we're going to watch you to see how you play out this virtual luncheon of 1,000 people, because it is a, you know, popular luncheon. They're not going to host it. They're going to host it virtually, but they're still going to have the same format. So, so yeah, tell your story, tell it through the lens of your clients.
Can I go outside and get those?
Yes. Tell it through the story of your the lens of your clients and supporters and advocates, and keep pushing that message out, whether it be, you know, through your social media and sort of that organic base, because, you know, I can tell you, we don't buy, you know, we don't buy search engine optimization. We don't buy ads. We do it through the support of what we have internally, which is our social media, our e-blast. And then we push it out. We have those relationships with media. So that's the other thing, is just continue to build those relationships, share your mission, and share it through the lens of a story and narration. Is that 10 minutes yet, Michelle? I think I'm good.
Perfect. You actually nailed it, Chau. So thank you very much. 10 exactly.
I'm good with time codes. Yeah.
I imagine as a former reporter you are. So yes. All right. We have had a couple questions through our Zoom group chat. I also have a question in my, as a text message, as a matter of fact, from someone on the phone. So the first question is, what fundraiser activity has proven to be the most effective and least effective in terms of, and think in terms of messaging as a resource?
Well, I would say least effective is a story I just told you. I see that donors really, you know, in our experience, they do not want to be notified via text message that you'd need money. I think most effective is in our experience, is sharing the stories of the survivors and sharing it through our multimedia channels, right? Whether it be on the news, on social media, or through an e-blast. That has been very effective. We have not had an overt ask, to be quite frank with you. We haven't said donate. We haven't done the donate now. Now, if people ask, we say, what is our greatest need? It is a financial contribution, and it will go to support survivors in this specific, you know, area, because this is the need right now. So the messaging I'm doing right now is very, very COVID centric, because that's what's on people's minds.
Great, thank you. Our next question from Rob is, how do we deal with the huge flood of corporate businesses and nonprofits competing to get their impact messaging out? Next question, is this just survival of the fittest?
You know, I think that you can't, I'm hearing a child. I think that, what's wrong, Miles? I'm sorry. Compare can lead to despair. I think you just focus on your mission and you move forward without worrying that there's this competition and this, you know, the swirl of fear around you that things might, what's wrong?
She's hurt.
What happened?
She got a splinter in her toe.
Okay, I will help her in a few minutes. I'm dealing with child issues, I'm sorry. You know, you just move full force ahead with your mission and your focus, and don't allow that swirl of fear and competition to distract you.
Great. And Chau, you want to go and check on Miles, and we can follow up at the end with the
Okay,
question?
we have a splinter, we'll be fine.
3 splinters.
Okay.
What happened?
She was outside.
Okay, I will help her in a second. Thank you.
All right. Our last question through message is can you give us an example? I just got a second question, mind you, but can you give us an example of how building a long-term relationship has increased your giving from a specific donor? So I'm guessing that the context around the question is perhaps this was a donor that maybe had given a small amount, but you've been able to grow it into a large amount around your impact message where it really resonated with that donor.
Yeah. You know, one donor comes to mind who was really started as a friend who heard about the organization, and then it's relationships, right? Bringing them to the first free lunch and learn, taking them to an event, giving them a tour of the shelter, to, hey, you're an executive in a leadership position in a corporate environment. Maybe you should join a committee, then maybe you should join the board. And, you know, talking about the needs of our clients, and everybody is pulled to a different need, right? So this particular donor and now board member, and he and his wife are also supporters of the agency. They have stepped up to say, you know what, there's a need for haircuts at our shelter, and it's not consistent. So we've had volunteers come in and say, I want to cut hair, but then they don't come back, and then we can't schedule it. So they have actually underwritten the funding to pay for the barbers and to revamp the salon. And so you know, that is a long-term relationship. You don't go in expecting that relationship to, you know, be in a big supportive nature as they do now. So you know, and it really is whatever they were interested in. And so you know, to bring somebody into an agency, you know, think about a small lunch and learn or a tour, or you know, just an event that they may go to. I think events, people, you know, naysay events, but it's a really good opportunity for you to share your mission and message. And then just things like liking our social media and following us on our email blast, you know, subscribing to our emails. Those things are very helpful.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Chau. I appreciate this very much, and you giving us an hour of your already very busy Friday. We're going to move into the learning segment of our webinar. Folks, if you have questions for Chau, please hold them to the last 5 minutes of today. And then if you have additional questions after that, or would just like some one-on-one conversation, we'll keep the Zoom line open until 12:15 Eastern Time. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and open up the PowerPoint, oopsie daisy, the PowerPoint presentation to talk about today. All righty, share screen is happening right now. For some reason, it's giving me a little bit of trouble. All righty, hopefully everyone is able to see my screen.
Yes.
All right, if there are any issues, you can message Logan. All righty, here we go. So today's webinar is about creating an impact message that attracts and amplifies resources. throughout this entire webinar series, when we talk about resources, we're looking at those financial, monetary resources. We're also looking at non-monetary resources. And Chau, you did a great job of throwing me the softball because she elevated a non-monetary resource, which was around an entity providing haircuts for their program participants, the clients that they serve. So that's a good example of a non-monetary resource. Today, we're looking at, whoa, okay, hold on, folks. There we go. We're looking at resources through the lens of having a strong impact message. So how can you spend your time and the due diligence that you need to in creating a very strong impact message and building out your story so that you can attract resources, again, monetary, non-monetary. Those could be donors, grant makers, folks from the business and corporate community that believe in the type of work that you do. One of the reasons that I had everyone elevate the issue area that you work in through the introductions is so that you can really start thinking through your lens, the lane that you work in, at how to strengthen your messaging. Today, I'm introducing a model. It's a resourcing systems change model. And we'll be talking through it with our worksheet that was emailed out to everyone by Logan, I believe yesterday and again today. So you'll find it in your email with the Zoom information. So moving on, we've been working through all of our resource issue areas using the worksheet that you see on our screen. And so there is the deep purpose statement, which I'll describe in a moment. And then we have 3 different categories: leadership, vision, and impact. So these are the areas that we can really use and leverage to enhance our resources. The first is around leadership. And so many of us on this call or this webinar, we're leaders in our own right, in our own organizations, in our movements, among our collaborations, etc. And so I know myself as a leader of the organization I represent and the work that I do in the Southeast, and honestly internationally as well, is around, I really pride myself on being very confident. I know what I'm doing. I care about the work that I do. But for me to really take that leadership to the next level, I need to be focused on being that bold leader. Secondly, around vision. Again, I pride myself on being a very creative visionary. I think of outside of the box ways of attracting resources, of engaging community, of tackling issues through multi-sector engagement. But for me to be incredibly effective and a visionary in the long term, folks, that's what we're talking about, long term, I need to be innovative. What can I do to innovate? What can I do that is spectacular? What you might hear sometime is the wow. And then lastly is impact. And so the lenses that we're looking at impact is through being a collaborative impact leader and a transformative impact leader. So how can we have the strongest, the broadest impact? How can we amplify our message the best by being collaborative? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But to take that to the next level, how can we be transformative in our impact? And this really speaks to systems change. How can we transform systems? The work that every single one of us on this call are doing, we do it because we care. We do it because we have passion about it. We do it because we want to see a difference. And to do that, you've got to think through the lens of being transformative. How can we see that social change that we want to see? And that takes us to our North Star. Our North Star, and I actually have a little, I think it's Swarovski, a little star that I've got hanging in my bedroom. I look at it every day. And that is my North Star. And when I wake up in the morning, I remind myself, why I do the work that I do, for the folks that I do the work for, where I do the work, and ultimately, what is my legacy? Really, what am I hoping by the time that God calls my name, what am I really hoping to see changed? And so I want to flip back up and quickly talk about the deep purpose statement. The deep purpose statement is where, as we're going through the remainder of this learning portion of the webinar, I want you to think about the deep purpose statement and the context of the deep purpose for you as the leader of your institution, strengthening your impact message. Why are you doing it? What is the deep purpose that you have to make you sit down, write it out, bring your boards involved, get feedback from volunteers and stakeholders around your messaging? Is your deep purpose to attract clients? In Chau's case, is it to attract folks to their program, to their shelters? Is your deep purpose to attract donors? Is your deep purpose to attract grant makers through your messaging? Is it to attract partners? Is it all of them? And many of you are going to say it's all of them. But folks, you can't tackle all of them at once. So really try to think about how to prioritize and categorize. All right, moving on. Okay, leadership. In terms of developing your impact message, you need to think about it around your theory of change. So quickly, by a show of hands, for everyone that's on this call and has got video on, raise your hand if you have a theory of change for the organization that you represent. All righty. Okay, all right, so not everybody. A theory of change is truthfully really articulating why your nonprofit or your collaboration or your community group exist. If I put on my PR hat, it's the who, what, when, where, why, and how of your institution, of your organization, of your initiative, of your movement. And so questions when you're thinking around your theory of change is, who is your target population? Who do you serve? What are your mission-driven activities you're engaged in? So how do you serve those individuals? And lastly, what are your outcomes you're hoping to achieve? Right now, we have the coronavirus. You know, what are those short-term outcomes? But folks, we need to think also 2021, 2022, and even further. What are those long-term outcomes you're looking to achieve? Really, what is that? And again, be guided by your North Star, be guided by your vision as you're thinking about these questions. And you can't create a strong impact message without having a grasp of your theory of change. Tips, tricks, and tools around a theory of change. I'm going to actually take you down to the very last bullet point with the Aspen Institute, a great entity out west, and they have been a group that I go to occasionally when I get stuck on really how to talk about something. But they've got a great tool in there about building a theory of change. And this particular one is around the community builders approach. And so I encourage you after this call, or when you have some downtime, and I guess those of us in this sector never do, but if you do, go check it out. But around that theory of change, make sure you articulate the social change that you seek. You can put all the logistics around your organization, where you're located and things like that. You can toss in some data into that salad, but at the end of the day, what people really align with and what resonates is the social change that you're seeking. And what is that impact you're trying to have? Again, think through the lens of that North Star. Lead with language that illustrates your vision. So don't start out talking about maybe a small program that you're doing or something you're trying to start, but unless it really does illustrate your vision. So don't lead with tactical language, folks. You want to lead with more of that strategic, visionary language. You need to show the folks that are receiving your messaging how they're part of that story. If I struggle to be a part of your story, then it's probably not going to end up being something that I'm going to give my resources towards, whether that's money, my time, to serve as a speaker or a tutor to children, whatever that might be. And again, lastly, and thank you, Rob, for lifting this up, is, really think around your multi-sector partnerships that align with your vision. And so to be bold around our theory of change, what you want to think about is how can you turn these bold ideas into reality and change lives for the better? And so I'd like to elevate an organization that I have worked with in the past, and then I'm going to turn this over to everyone else on the call to chime in. And hopefully one person will be bold enough, one of our leaders today, to talk about your theory of change. But as a very quick, real example, there has been a racial equity organization that I've worked with now for many years. I've never talked about them throughout this webinar series, but they're amazing. They have a very visionary leader. But one thing that he did very, very early on was craft and draft and share a very strong theory of change around equity. Before people even knew what equity even was, we always said equality back then. And he never wavered from it, never. And so that is why that theory of change has remained strong today. It's helped him build a super strong organization. They've probably grown by 20 times in budget and staff, et cetera, because he stayed very true to his North Star around that theory of change. All right, friends on the call, who would like to lift up your theory of change? I know we have someone out there. I'm scrolling through right now.
I can start.
Thank you.
I think one of the theories of change that I think I'm trying to practice is just getting started. A lot of times with change, it's difficult. I know, at least for me, I think about a lot of things, but I don't put it into practice. I'll write it down. I'll have to-do list. I have a to-do list on my board. I have a digital to-do list, and things that I want to change or adjust and improve. But it's just getting started and knowing, kind of tying back to that, it's easy once you start. So I think that's my initial theory, is just start.
Great. Thank you very much for sharing. I know for me personally, with new programs I've started or new initiatives, or honestly, even my business, sometimes just figuring out how to start and trying to craft that was one of my biggest challenges. So thank you for elevating that. Anybody else on our webinar today would like to talk about your theory of change?
Yeah, this is JT.
Hello.
Well, I just off of Asif, how do you pronounce?
Asif.
Asif, okay. Just on what Asif said about starting, I think one of the things that I have found, because it's what I do, I mean, that is my whole role with the training and development, is the change management stuff, is you always start with the end in mind. What is the change going to accomplish? And when you can keep that top of mind, that really propels you to get started and then commit, stay committed to the process. Another thing is, Michelle, when you and I met, we talked about this, is that you really have to identify, that's microly in a personal change, you would start with the end in mind as well. But organizationally, you need to get everyone on board with that end goal, and that is what propels the change. But the other thing that does it is you identify the change agents in your organization. You identify your change champions and the people that are more just oriented to change. And then you have to identify what we call, those middle people that they could take it or leave it. And then obviously your resistors. But I think with any type of change, always start with the end in mind. And for those people that are in the middle, or the ones that are what we call late adopters or resistors, the way that I've seen a lot of success in overcoming that is you tell them what won't change. Because, you know, we're not going to take all your toys from your sandbox. We might only take the big truck, but don't tell them what's going to change. Tell them what they get to keep or what's not going to change and how their life will stay the same, because there's something to be said for security, you know, and so when people are used to something or we're in our comfort zones, if we're not going to radically change everything, it's good for those late adopters or those resistors to understand what won't change.
Great. Thank you for elevating that, JT. Change is difficult. We know that. Go ahead, Ollie. Go for it, ma'am.
So with our organization, and I have had the chance of being able to see a process that we have developed for 17 years. So I have seen the beginning of it, and now I can see the results. And we aimed 17 years ago to help kids become more more educated, more engaged, more empowered, more self-reliant, girls more to live with more equity, because we work in a very rural community in the Osa Peninsula, and there's a lot of machismo and stuff like that. Girls were supposed to stay in the kitchen and, you know, have kids when they're 15, and, you know, and we envision to have to see that change, to see kids, local kids, being more entrepreneurial, more independent. And we have been working very hard to promote not only values, but also to open their minds. And we've seen like the impact of leadership and how like having environmental educators that are different to their parents, that are leaders, that are women, that are doing stuff that they could not imagine they could do, have changed them. So now we have kids that 17 years ago were 12 and now they're 29, and we have women that are young women that are empowered, that are leading their own businesses, that are leading their own projects in their communities. And we believe that a good role model and the fact of in changing the paradigm, how do you say it? Can't say that word. Changing the mind frame that they have had forever has made a huge difference in their lives, and that we believe in that change. We believe in that theory of change, and we have been investing for years now, after we proved that it actually worked, into changing the mindsets, opening their horizons, their opportunities, promoting education, promoting equity, that kind of stuff.
Did you see Charlie creep up?
I saw Charlie.
All righty, thank you very much for sharing that, Ollie. And you know, one point of note is that theories of change evolve and they change with the times. I think we're seeing that right now, so keep that in mind. All right, folks, we're going to move on to our next area to explore. Oh, excuse me, I actually skipped ahead. Okay, hold on, I skipped ahead. Okay, what is your case for support? By a show of hands, would you raise them and show us if you actually have a case for support? A written, a video case for support, maybe? Alrighty, there are some folks on our webinar today that don't have it, so I'm happy to talk about it. And just as a quick note, we're down to about 5 minutes, so I'm going to talk through the next 2 slides, and then we'll quickly look at the model, and we'll probably wrap up right about noon Eastern time, but we'll have an additional 15 minutes for those that like to stay on for questions. All right, a case for support. So what that basically is a very persuasive argument, if you will, for why an individual, a corporation, a potential partner, a donor would support your change work. And so again, I've seen it in the forms of video. I've seen written case for supports. I've seen case for supports that are this long. I have seen one-page case for supports. A gentleman that has been on a lot of our webinars, we wrapped up really a case for support that we'd worked on for about a year. I guess probably about a month and a half ago. And it took a long time to do because he didn't have his theory of change written and really articulated. And so we tabled the case for support until we did, because you really need to have that done before you can actually go out and be persuasive at why someone who could support anybody else, any other institution should support you. Thought questions around that. What community need are you trying to address? Is it child welfare? Is it around child abuse and neglect? Is it around environmental injustices? And so what is that area that you're trying to find a solution to, or to solve, or to make better for community? What are the results that you're achieving? And a strong case for support with a savvy reader, they really want to know, what are you doing with the resources that have been given to you in the past? How have you made impact? And you need to articulate that in some way, whether graphically, verbally, by bullet points, whatever, in your case for support. Some tips, tricks, and tools around that, and again, I'm gonna draw you to the last point at the bottom, is a Habitat for Humanity has got a great case for support. I strongly recommend you take a peek at that whenever you have a chance. It's wonderful. There's a second institution here in Georgia called Junior Achievement. They have got a really great case for support. One thing that is core to both of them is that they're very image heavy, and these are both actually decks, if you will, slide decks. They're very image heavy and content light. So it really is kind of what Chau lifted up during her presenting POW presentation. What really was a story. So they were communicating to the story through the presentation. Another thing is really connecting the message, your impact message, to stories of community. And so if that is not included in your case for support, you're really going to struggle having that end reader, the end user, if you will, connect to your mission. And then you have to, I've written a lot of case for supports, and I have a lot of folks who really don't want to include their financial model, their structure, where they get their resources from. You really need to do that. People that give dollars to an organization want to know where you're getting them from. And so again, I encourage you to include that in a strong case for support. Moving on to our third area. There we go. Around impact. How can we be collaborative in our impact? So we're not doing it alone. We recognize that we can't do it alone. And so when we're being collaborative, we want to also think about, as we're developing collaborations and partnerships, initiatives, how can we be transformative in them? And again, our lens today, folks, is developing that impact message. And so who are your resource stakeholders? Once you have your theory of change, you have a case for support, you need to think about developing a stakeholder profile to understand who are the folks that you're trying to attract. And we'll talk a tiny bit more. We're getting close to running out of time. Ooh, we have 1 minute. And so thought questions around this. Have you identified the ideal donor? Friends, trying to say everybody doesn't work. You really need to identify who you are looking for. Have you identified grant makers, so philanthropy, potentially public sources, corporate foundations, etc., that align with what you do? If you are a organization that focuses on child abuse and neglect, and you're looking at a potential funder who is focused in the environmental space, they're probably not a good fit for you. Some tips, tricks, and tools around this is your board is a great starting point. Leverage your board, my friends. Please do that. I have so many folks that have got board of directors, and they never ask them any questions or try to involve them. Ali with Corcovado Foundation is a great example of keeping her board up to date and up to speed. She is constantly communicating with them through a WhatsApp message, and they actually help craft her impact message, which I think is truly amazing. Quickly about creating a resource stakeholder profile. Note that I'm not calling this a donor stakeholder profile. I'm calling this resource stakeholder profile. You might want to think about it categorically at first. And so looking at resources, we'll start with donors. They're a resource. But you also want to look at the foundations that you're looking to attract. And so to me, it's almost a two-step process, really thinking categorically about it, and then secondly, thinking more specific and individual about it. And one thing I recognized as I was doing some research and developing this webinar is there really aren't any good tools out there around a resource stakeholder profile. So my company, my friends, my wonderful team, we're going to create one and put it up on the resource page in the next week. So I hope that you will check that out. So lastly, as we're trying to be these transformative leaders, as we're trying to communicate a transformative impact message, the point of it is how can you activate your supporters around your theory of change? So friends, we're kind of going full circle. And that takes us into the next slide, which is, this is a model that I've put together. And I'll quickly talk through it, but we don't have much time. And so you want to make sure that as your theory of change is really addressing that challenge, whether it's, and it might not be your specific community. It could be on behalf of a medical issue area. It could be any number of things, but really, what is that challenge? Then you're looking at you as an organization. So you are the intervention, if you will, and you're trying to provide a solution or a service or a resource to that challenge. And then you have the beliefs and values of those stakeholders. And you're really looking to find alignment between those beliefs and values of those stakeholders with what you do. So you'll see here this little sweet spot where the top arrow is pointing at. That's your target stakeholder. That's when I say you are not going willy-nilly about this, is that you're really trying to decide who is that ideal stakeholder. Again, donor, grant maker, partner, a potential board member even. And then as you're thinking through that, you're, again, keeping all of these bubbles in mind. You're thinking about your theory of change. And then what you'll find out, this beautiful thing that will happen, is the available resources will start to bubble up because you've been very articulate in your impact message. You know who you're trying to attract. And what happens then, guys, is that transformative thing that we've been talking about throughout this entire webinar series. We're figuring out a way to resource that change. If you're looking to do systemic change, you're figuring out how to resource that change through multi-sector collaborations. You're bringing everybody to the table to really help resolve this community challenge. All right, friends, so that is my spiel there. I am sorry, it looks like we are a few minutes over, but to quickly wrap us up, and Logan, you can take yourself off mute because you're gonna help me with that, so you are a much faster talker than I am, is we're gonna have Logan just quickly talk about where some of our resources are at. But before she does, I want to sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, thank all of you, my friends, for the good work that you're doing, what you did in the past, what you're doing right now during these incredibly challenging times that we're all living in, and also what you're going to do in the future as leaders in your organizations, in your communities, on behalf of the issues and the things that we're really trying to drive change. So thank you, everybody, for the super hard work you're doing. Logan, before you chat, and I'm trying to shut up, but quickly, other learning opportunities out there. Georgia Center for Nonprofits, folks, please go to their website. They have great resources around this whole loan debacle out there. Great resources around generating grants and developing partnerships and all of this stuff. And they're resources that are pertinent right now during COVID, and also resources in the future. Community Foundation of Northeast Georgia, every Thursday, they host a wonderful webinar that is really relevant around fund and resource development. There are a multitude of national sources as well that are doing trainings. The Stanford, I always call it SSIR, Stanford Social Innovation Review. There's Network for Good, another couple of good resources. Our topic next week, is around DAFs. So for anybody who doesn't know what a DAF is, it is a donor advised fund. And I love them, guys. You don't have to do hardly any work for them. And we're going to have Britt with Community Foundation for Northeast Georgia talk to us about that. Before we close, Logan, I'm going to send it to you. Go for it, lady.
All right, everybody. We have as you probably heard, a brand new website. It looks beautiful. We love it. I put the link in the chat. It's npvoicellc.com. And on our website, you can view all of our upcoming events under the events tab. And then also under the events tab, you can see we have all of our resources from each one of these webinars for you guys. It's titled Nonprofit Resources Through COVID-19. So we have a Google Doc, a running list that we are constantly updating, and all of those are on there. Asif's information on his technology resources for nonprofits is also listed on there as well. And then you can also see all of our past webinars, view all of the recordings, and get all of the worksheets, presentations, and all so on and so forth for each one of those on our events page that links to our YouTube channel. So let me know if I can help you guys getting any of this information, and we will send out a follow-up for this webinar as well. So check your emails. Thank you.
All righty. Well, it's a wrap, my friends. Charlie says it is time to go. We are 8 minutes over. I'm very sorry. Thank you again, everybody. I hope you join us next Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and we will be on the call for about another 15 minutes for folks who have some questions. Thank you all. Take care. Happy weekend. Love you. Whew. All righty. Okay, so Mandy, you're up. Do you have a question, my friend?
Well, the quick question is, who was the organization that you mentioned at the very end that you said does the weekly webinars? You mentioned them after Georgia Center for Nonprofits, but I didn't catch the name.
Sure, it is Community Foundation for Northeast Georgia, run by this guy named Randy Redner, who has been a wonderful mentor and truthfully such an amazing, transformative, collaborative leader. I just can't say enough accolades about him.
Okay.
All righty. Questions, folks, for myself, for Chau, for Logan. And again, Asif, thank you very much for being our presenting pal last week, and Chau for being our presenting pal this week.
So Chau, I sent you a LinkedIn invite, but seems like we have a few people in common in Houston, actually. So small.
Oh, how awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. All righty. Questions, anybody? I've got one. Let's see. Oh, here we go. We have some questions. Okay. I've got a question from someone about Mary Wilson about an organization I talked about earlier. And yes, Mary, if you're on the call, Partnership for Southern Equity is that entity. A question that came to me through text messaging is, okay, oops, give me a second. I'm getting to it. I got a whole bunch of messages. In fact, I got a couple of questions. Is around developing a case for support. And so the question is, what does a good case for support look like? That's a hard question to answer. A case for support is really a document that is a reflection of your organization. It's a reflection of what you do. And it's a reflection of the change that you want to see. But keep in mind, when you're developing a case for support, it is to be more persuasive in nature, and you're looking to attract support through that case for support. Another question that came in is for Chau, and we had a similar question in the past, but the question is for you, Chau. Can you give us an example of a donor, or actually I think what she meant was a supporter who was a volunteer for your organization, but ended up transitioning to a donor because of a message or your story, or she wrote a long thing here, I'm paraphrasing, of something you put out there that really inspired her to become a donor.
Yeah, I think volunteers to me is like the low-hanging fruit, the pipeline to any organization, because they get to do the hands-on work. So volunteers come in for our agency through special events, through drives, right? Our back-to-school drive, our Christmas drive, and yeah, the engagement, working with the clients or working with the kids is, to me, low-hanging fruit. So we've had many volunteers who have come in as volunteers and who have moved up anywhere from just, you know, donating to working in our hotlines to board service, because they've actually experienced the mission.
Great. Thank you very much, Chau. I appreciate that, my brilliant lifelong friend. I have another question that has come to me through a text message, and then I got another private one for Chau and then one for me. And so the question for me is around a theory of change. And so the question is, how do you get started with a theory of change? And I have a feeling that this message came to me as a result of what both Asif and John lifted up. Truthfully, folks, to get started is you actually just have to say you're going to do it, quite frankly, and there was another one. There is, excuse me, but yes, very simply, you have to get started. And then 2 is you need to bring folks to the table, to this decision-making table, if you will, this creative, courageous space to talk about the change that you're wishing to seek. So you want to bring people from all different levels and walks of your organization, board members, volunteers, donors, funders, and you want to leave the alphabet friends at the door. And so when you walk in that room, the power is balanced. We're all on the same page. You have your executive director, your CEO, and you might have someone who, if you work for a YMCA, that's a lifeguard. And so the beauty in that is that you're really trying to attack this change message and what your vision is with just input from everyone who contributes in all of these beautiful but often very different ways. And what you'll find out is that those individual visions are very different. And so really the challenge is figuring out how you're going to articulate that impact message that resonates with all of these groups. Chau, for you, has your organization been able to check with some donors to customize to their desire how often and via which path to get your message? E.g., I only want to get a message twice a year.
So we, just to give you, I'm sorry. Sorry, I have to constantly tell them to go do their classwork because they want to play, right? So what we do is we identify, we receive up to 5,000 donations a year, which is anywhere from $5 to, you know, the tens of thousands of dollars. So we really do kind of cull them into certain pockets, right? And then we strategize as a team, because you can't do it alone, right? It can't just be me. It can't be our development director. It can't be our special events person. It can't be our foundations. We identify, and then we cultivate those relationships. And it really starts with a phone call, then in person, and then say, you know, what type of communications do you want to receive? And some of our donors don't. For example, we have a lottery winner donor who gives us $100,000 a year for the last several years because he won the lottery. Mickey, you'll appreciate this. He lived in Katy, right? He won the lottery, and back then it was like the biggest lottery in the world. You know, in the state of Texas, it's probably not the biggest. It was a lot of money, but he moved to El Paso or something. But he said, I'm going to send you a check every year. I don't want anything, right? So we just do what the donor, it's really, you know, you do what the donor wants you to do. If they don't want to receive messages, if they don't want to go to your lunch and learns, don't force them. But we still try to keep some level of engagement every year. You know, our CEO writes a nice note to say thank you, that kind of stuff.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chau. Let me pause before I read the last question that I've got to see if anyone who has stuck around has something that you'd like to ask as we're wrapping up here? Nope. All righty. So the last question is sort of a funny one. Are we really going to wear pajamas next Friday? The answer is yes. I think I will. So for those of y'all that tune in next Friday, please do. Again, thank you all for being here today. Have a blessed and beautiful weekend, and we'll see you next Friday. Bye, everyone.